Welcome to Enviro Close-Up. You might remember the name E.F. Schumacher. He's the man who wrote that line. In fact, he wrote a book of this name, Small is Beautiful. A very important American philosopher, an American environmentalist, an American economist. Well, his message is not dead, though E.F. Schumacher has passed away. There's something called the E.F. Schumacher Society, and Jake Sterling is with the organization trying to carry on what Schumacher was all about.
Yeah, well, one of the things we're doing is promoting alternative currencies. And an alternative currency is basically a money system that it doesn't replace the dollar system, but it adds an extra margin of economic activity on top of that. In Ithaca, New York, there's something called Ithaca Hours functioning right now. A man named Paul Glover is responsible for that, and he worked with us to establish the ideas behind that. In Ithaca Hours, there are now $470,000 worth of currency in circulation right now, which people can go to the movies with. They can take small loans out in Ithaca Hours. They can get their hair cut with Ithaca Hours. They can get their roof fixed if it snows with Ithaca Hours. All of these things are done because there wasn't enough money circulating. And so even though there were people who wanted to have their roof fixed, and there were people who could fix the roof, there was nobody who could pay to have the roof fixed. But with Ithaca Hours, enough more money was circulated into the economy that buying power was made accessible to those people.
Let's get back to Ithaca Hours in a second and how it works and what the IRS thinks of it. But first, let's talk about E.F. Schumacher. I mean,
okay.
People, I think, E.F. Schumacher's general ideas, general theories, again, people are probably familiar with that small is beautiful line.
Sure.
Now, what was that about, and what was E.F. Schumacher about?
First of all, I need to correct you a little bit. He wasn't American. He was, in fact, German, and he lived in England. That's important because the English care about that. His idea was, he worked a lot with third world countries, and he was concerned that the economic scale of Western help to third world countries was so intense and so big, the projects they sponsored were so big, that people who grew up in villages, say in India, really couldn't communicate with those things. They couldn't respond to them. For instance, if the Aswan Dam is built, it's so large that a huge amount of money comes into Egypt, and immediately the people who make the money spend it outside of Egypt so that the money doesn't circulate. Well, this doesn't do anything at all for the population, the local population of Egypt. That was the kind of problem that he was concerned with.
He was talking about decentralized economics.
Exactly, decentralized economics and appropriate scale technology.
And he was very hot in the 60s.
Early 70s, late 60s.
Late
yeah.
60s.
President Carter was even interested in what he had to say.
Oh yeah, it was like McLuhan and Schumacher and people.
Something that a lot of people say who are involved in environmental thinking, ecological thinking, is that information is international. They say think globally, act locally, and I think that's very crucial. That it depends on what you're talking about. It's appropriate to talk internationally when you're talking about communication, information exchange. When you're talking about what it's appropriate to do, that's a different matter. Because, for instance, transporting goods over long distances has environmental impact. Just because we have to have the infrastructure for roads, trucking, get use of petroleum, all those things. If you can buy locally, if you can produce locally, and that's the preferred method. Not that you don't trade, but that when you trade, it's the second choice. The first choice is always the local choice. When you can do that, environmentally, it's much sounder. And in terms of rural communities, or just communities that are not in the mainstream of the New York, Tokyo, London kind of trading, anything like the Midwest in the United States, that's it's much better for those communities. It brings strength into those communities, so they don't dissolve, which is what's happened to so many towns in the Midwest. People have become poor citizens of cities instead of prosperous citizens of a rural community.
Let's get back to Ithaca Hours now.
Okay.
Why did they need Ithaca hours? I mean, why do they need this kind of parallel, this alternative?
Not enough money in the economy.
But I mean, you
Essentially,
got
that's
to pay
it.
for Ithaca hours, no? I mean, you have to.
Well, no. As a matter of fact, you don't. And it's hard for people to understand that all money is debt. But essentially what happens is you borrow money, and it's made out of nothing. This is exactly the same way US dollars are made, except in this case, the US government borrows them. In this case, it's citizens that are borrowing them. Because it's made out of nothing, in fact, no interest has to be paid. But the money eventually does have to be repaid. But in the meantime, between the time the loan has been made and the time it's repaid, and essentially goes back to zero, I don't know if that's clear, but in the meantime, the person who borrowed the money spent it on the grocer spent it on the haircut spent it on the roof, and it's gone around. Each time that's what they call the multiplier effect in economics. So that $1 worth of Ithaca hours is actually worth $10 worth of economic activity in the Ithaca economy.
This has been Enviro Close-Up, the focus on E.F. Schumacher's legacy. This has been Carl Grossman. Thanks for watching.